Hello, welcome back to our stress management seminar. We're trying to create a different stress response, a new stress response. This class number 5, we're going to be talking about our belief system. We already mentioned it at the very beginning of our seminar, how our beliefs are completely and directly linked to our stress response. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about our emotional response, how it's linked to our stress response, and how our beliefs are the foundation of those stress response and emotional responses. Our beliefs are biased. They influence how we feel, how we think, and how we act. Our beliefs shape how we interpret our experiences and then the decisions that we take as a consequence of those interpretations. Sometimes these beliefs may be triggered by a memory, an event that happened at home, at church, or at work, a smell like we talked in our prior classes. Many things could trigger our belief system, and that will trigger a cascade of emotions, and that cascade of emotions will eventually end up in a decision-making process. Sometimes we tell a child, "You're just like your mom," or "You're just like your father. This is the way he always acted," or "This is the way she always behaved." Part of our personality, it is influenced by our genetic makeup. But one thing we could remember is that, yes, we do have our genetic makeup that will decide what personalities we have, but we could choose which ones we activate or deactivate based on the habits that we create. For example, in a family where the mom suffers from depression and it happens to that her mom also, the grandma, suffer from depression, does it mean that you are going to suffer from depression? The beauty of it is that we can create conscious of that and change habits in our lives that change, number one, the dialogues that we're having in our brains, and also our daily routines and habits that could increase our health or create detriment to our health. So even though our parents and our teachers and everybody around us when we were growing up have a huge influence on our belief system, as an adult, I could create conscience of this and decide what beliefs I want to keep and what beliefs I am willing to change or improve. We're going to be talking about the ABCs of the emotions. This information, you can find it in the book written by Dr. Lynn Clark, the SOS for our emotions. I highly recommend it. We're just gonna give you some introduction to the book in this class. So for the letter A, it's called activation. This is when you either smell something or you see something or you hear something, anything that you perceive through your senses that brings a memory back. And that is called the activation moment. Or it happens that you leave the situation in that moment. So you can either be living it at this moment, you could be remembering something that happened in the past, or you could be anticipating something that is going to happen in the future. And that is what activates the emotional part of your brain that starts triggering the stress response that something could hurt you. Once this activation happens, then comes the level 2, which is the B section, which is the belief. The belief that gets triggered, it could be either a rational belief that we created all through our life, or an irrational belief that also we created through our childhood or young adulthood. And number 3, or C, is consequences. If irrational thinking predominates in our mindset, in our belief system, with time, through the years, that could push us to fall into depression or anxiety. And what do I mean by irrational thinking? What Dr. Clark mentions is, as we develop and we create our mindset with our experiences, we create a dialogue in our mind. Everything that must happen or should happen, or things that should not or must not happen in our lives. And as we grow up and become adults, we use these dialogues to make decisions. And when something we don't like, we say this must not happen, and we act according to our dialogue. Then we link our must and shoulds to these 5 things that Dr. Clark mentions in the book. Always, never, it's awful, I can't stand it, I'm not worth it, or we do condemnation. For example, while I was at work today, my boss embarrassed me in front of my coworkers, and I get really upset about it. So I start thinking, he or she should not have treated me this way. How dare she treats me this way? This always happens to me. This is awful. I can't stand it. I'm never going to be able to talk to my coworkers again. This is so embarrassing. This is all my boss's fault. And we keep thinking about this the whole day. And then we add to this and we say, I should have said this. I should have said that. Why didn't I defend myself? And you get angry at yourself. You get more angry at your boss. And then through the night, you can't fall asleep because you're thinking about it. I should have said this. I should have defended myself. I should have stood up for myself. And then all that, you keep getting yourself upset. You keep thinking about it. So you create a negative cycle. You think about it, you become upset. And in that upsetness, we're triggering the stress response because we are thinking about it the whole day long. Dr. Clark mentions that there is a different way of using our belief system, that it will not trigger our stress response, and that it will help us stay calm and calm our emotions down. In the book, it mentions that instead of using must or should, that we could use the word wish. We could wish for things to be different. That way, when they don't happen, it's not devastation. Let's use the same example. My boss mistreated me today at work. I wish my boss would not have said that comment at work today. And if she had something to say, I wish she would have said it to me in person, not in front of my coworkers. I'm going to talk to her about it and tell her that if she has something for me that I need to learn, that I will prefer she talks to me in person. If my conversation with my boss doesn't go anywhere, it's okay. I'm an adult. I can take it. A big part of our belief system comes from the trials and tribulations that we experience growing up. A lot of us experience adversity growing up. What do I mean by that? There was a study done by Kaiser Permanente and CDC back in 1995. They call it the ACE studies. They asked over 17,000 people if they had experienced adversity in their life. They had specific adversity that they asked about. They asked if they had experienced physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical or emotional neglect, and if they had been exposed to domestic violence, or there was substance abuse at home, there was mental illnesses at home, or if their parents had been separated or divorced, or if the parents had been incarcerated. They only did these questions. And every time a person answered yes to one of them, the score will be 1 ace. Every time they said yes to a question, it will add another ace in the ACE score. Some of the things that they learned from this study was that when there is dysfunction at home, you can see it even years later in the person's life, that the person are more susceptible for many chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and also they saw a higher incidence of drugs use and depression and anxiety. Why will people suffer more as an adult if they had adversity during childhood? Dr. Heringa explains it this way. When we're little, we get scared of everything. You know that if your brother or sister tells you that there's monsters in the closet, you believe it and you stay as far away from the closet as you can. I remember when my youngest daughter was little, we used to go to the lake, and her cousins and her older sister will tell her that there were sharks in the lake, and she believed it. So she wouldn't go in the water for years until she figured out that they were lying. As we grow up, our belief system changes. We were afraid of the monsters under the bed, and now we learn that there's no monsters under the bed. So we're stop being afraid of going under the bed or going inside the closet. The same way my youngest daughter learned not to be afraid of going in the water. She learned that there was no danger there. But when children experience a lot of adversity growing up, that threshold does not go higher. The threshold for fear stays low. That's why when they become adults, the stress response continue to be triggered easily for them, and is more difficult for them to control their stress response because of their childhood beliefs that they continue through their lives. In trauma victims, especially in children, the amygdala gets more reactive as you age instead of less reactive. The AIDS study helps us understand how all our early life experiences and young adult experiences still influence how I respond to challenges today. Those beliefs that I created, they still come into play into our daily life now. The must and shoulds that I link together with the always, never, it's awful, I can't stand it. We need to create conscience of, are we using these must and shoulds? And if we are, then by creating conscience and discovering them when we're using them, it's going to help us stop the negative cycles. These negative cycles that we call rumination do not have a resolution, and all they do is just get bigger and bigger as we think about them. If we do not learn to end these negative cycles, eventually we're going to end up in anxiety or in depression. So it's important that we create awareness that they exist and that we can discover them when they're happening, so we can put an end to them and create a complete different response to our challenges. A response that helps us grow instead of taking us into an anxiety pathway. Our body is wonderfully made. God made this beautiful body that has the ability to heal itself. For example, when we get hurt, like we break our bone or we have a laceration on our skin, we go to the doctor, they put a few stitches, and eventually after 10 days, the skin is glued back together again. But what happens if I choose to remove the stitches? Would the laceration heal? Not as fast, because every time I move my hands, the laceration will open again, and it will take a lot longer to heal. That's the same thing we do when we're thinking about our emotional wounds. Every time we're thinking about them, we remember our hurt feelings because our thoughts of the hurt come back, and then we start feeling all upset in our bodies. We need to change the perspective of what is happening. If we learn to recognize that our primary distress is coming from our hurt feelings or thoughts, that this physical upsetness that I'm suffering right now, it doesn't come from what offended me or what hurt me. That could have happened days ago, and I'm still getting as upset as I was the first day it happened. So what is making me upset is the memories of my feelings, the memories of my upsetness, and I keep triggering the stress response and getting upset all over again. So let's talk about some strategies into how I can change my must and shoulds and stop linking them to these always, never, it's awful, I can't stand it. How can I change these processes so I can have a more wholesome life? Strategy number 1, create a separation from what's happening so you can have time to think about it. So say to yourself, time out, do some yawning, and then calm your body down, which is strategy number 2. Take some deep breathing that will calm your stress response, and it would allow you to think clearly. Once we calm down and we lowered our stress response, then we can go to strategy number 3 and change our expectations. Our expectations of must and shoulds are only going to bring us trouble, because we know life is not fair and not always we're going to receive what we wanted. So changing our must and shoulds for I would like, but if it doesn't happen, I can manage it, I could stand it. That's the beginning of a new cycle of response. A cycle that will not trigger my stress response, that will help me stay calm, and then I will end the rumination of the negative thoughts. Number 4, change your strategy. If something doesn't work, it hasn't worked in the past, and it's not working now, maybe it's time to use a completely different strategy. Ask yourself, is this attitude helping me or is helping the people around me? And if it's not serving you well, maybe it's time to try a complete different one. Number 5, sometimes when we get hurt often, we begin to blame others for all of our misfortune. Because of my ex-husband, because of my wife, because of the kids, and everybody ends up being responsible for my sadness, my anxiety, my depression, and I don't find a way out of it. But maybe if I choose to be responsible for my emotional response to whatever is happening around me, that could trigger a complete different cascade response that will help me start getting out of an anxiety or depression process. Blame is a trap that if I fall into that, it's difficult to see what I could do in order to help myself get out of negative cycles. So pay attention. Who am I blaming? Am I taking responsibility? And if it's not, maybe it's time that I could start taking responsibility of one thing at a time. It's good to start a new way of thinking so we can create new beliefs. A way that we could help cement these new beliefs is by writing. You could write stories about yourself. You could write letters. You don't have to mail them to anybody. You don't have to share your stories with anyone. It's simply you want to write about this new belief system that you're creating. You could write about your old belief system, all your must and shoulds, and how it was awful before, but then you can change them into a new story with a new belief system, that sometimes things that you don't like do happen and you wish it could be different. But if for some reason things don't change, that you can handle it. But here comes the beauty of it. if I feel sometimes that I cannot handle it, there is God in heaven that will help me go through anything that I have to go through. Any difficulty, any challenges that I'm going through, I can lean on Him. I can hold His hand, and He will help me walk through whatever valley of difficulties that I'm going through at this time. I'm going to show you this technique that you could use before you go into sleep. In order to use it, you need to be calm. So first, do your diaphragmatic breathing. Take several deep breaths. And once you're calm and relaxed, take a piece of paper, and we're gonna call it our park board. We are gonna park here all our anxieties, our problems, our conflicts, and our restrictions. Everything that we've been thinking about during the day that might take us into a negative spin or a negative cycle, we're gonna park it in this board, and we're gonna do it before we go to sleep. Why? Because I do understand that it's difficult to change a whole life or habits of a habitual thinking. It's difficult. We're not going to be able to change it from one day to the next or 1 week to the next. So we're going to use several tools that will help us start triggering a new stress response. And the park board is a way that it could help us. So right now, before you go into bed, you start writing all the things that cause you anxiety, that you're worried about, that are in your mind, and you continue your negative cycles about them. You write them all down, and you could be writing 20, 50, 100, as many as you want. You write them all down. Once you finish your exercise, I want you to take another color pen or pencil, and I want you to go back to all your anxieties and your problems and your worries, and you circle the ones that you could do something about, the problems that you could fix, that depend on you to fix them. And you're gonna see that most of them, there's nothing you can do about them. As you go through them, circle them, and you're gonna have just a few of them. Write them in another piece of paper, and then create a plan of what you could do to fix these problems. A quick one, few strategies of what you can do to fix this problem, and then you're gonna be able to have a restful night of sleep because you already laid your problems to rest. And you can have this submission to the paper the same way you could submit all your problems to our Heavenly Father and submit them to Him, that sometimes they're too difficult for us to handle. And now you realize that they do not all belong to you, that you worry about your children, they're grown, they're married, or that you worry about your parents. All these things that we worry about, there's nothing we can do about it at that moment when we're going to sleep. So we can surrender these problems to the Lord. We can write them into the paper, and we can turn them into a prayer of, I can handle them. I put so much on my shoulders. This doesn't belong to me. I should not be worrying about all these things. So I give them to you, oh Lord. This way, we're creating new habits of thought, that these things don't belong to me to worry about, that they belong to our Heavenly Father. And slowly, we're going to be changing our stress response. So things that were triggering us before will not be triggering us in the future. And we're going to be calming our stress response down. I hope all the strategies that we've been learning every week for 5 weeks now are helping you recover your health and lower your stress response. By now, you should be able to calm yourself down with the diaphragmatic breathing and relax your body with the progressive relaxation. Adding these new tools to your toolbox will help you tackle the problems that come your way, and will help you stay calm at work and have a complete different response when a challenge comes your way. I wish that all these tools are helping you and are making a positive impact in your life. Have a wonderful week, and hopefully I'll see you again next class.